this is something new to iCAAD, not new to the rest of the world. It's all about digital technology and how it informs and it impacts our practice, the way we work with our clients. And I can say that it's extremely important to me because I'm completely blocked with IT, so I have to learn all that. But also something is important here. There's no way we can avoid it. We need to talk about it. We need to do something because we don't go against the time. We live in an open system, so we have to deal with it, I think, and make the best of it. So here's the question. What is the impact of digital innovation on clinical practice? Broad one. A friend of mine from Silicon Valley one day told me, Christophe, do you know that when you make a choice in high tech, it's already obsolete as soon as you made the choice? So I suppose it's not about being state of the art. It's about being able to make astute choices. In order to do what? Well, maybe increase quality, use novelty to broaden and think outside the box, maybe use what serves a better purpose. Choices are complex, I think. There are ethical problems. There are confidentiality problems. There are maybe neuroadaptation for the clinician, like I am. So that's not easy to answer. Now, good luck. It's a tough one. To discuss it, we have Sheri Jacobson today. Sheri is a clinician, first of all. She's a psychotherapist, so she's one of us. And she also developed over the last years maybe a passion, but also business about how to try to make the best possible use of those digital revolution. How does this make sense and how to work with that? So she is serving our sector, mental health or health at large, with fantastic innovation. And I think we're going to discuss about all those structure and what all it means today. Sheri speaks in media. That's not surprising, given our technology, maybe. She's training a lot of people, a lot of clinicians, a lot of students. And I think I covered it all, right? So the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you
very much, Christophe. Thank you. Well, goodness, thank you very much for assembling in this basement area, especially when the lure of the sun is very appealing today, and it's a bank holiday, so all the more thanks to you for coming out today. My aim today is not to scare you and think that we are going to be replaced by robo-psychologists tomorrow. Really the object is to get you to think, for me to introduce to you some of the concepts that are already used within our sector, the ones that are coming imminently, the ones that are maybe a little bit further ahead. But I think we still need to start contemplating what's on the horizon, and with a great deal of sensitivity, and particularly with clinical consideration and above all compassion for our clients. So that's where I'm a very, very pro-technology at the same time, realistic, and want to keep everything balanced and ethical and considerate at the same time. A little bit about me. I trained about 19 years ago now, and I've had multi-dimension training, so everything from psychodynamic to cognitive behavioral therapy. My thesis was on Freud, so very much kind of the traditionalist element in me. Very much a believer of the traditional format of once weekly therapy for 50 minutes. I've been in that kind of therapy since 17. I find it of huge benefit to my life, which kind of is also a springboard to my professional career as well. And I'm throughout the time that I've been, I set up private practice in 2006, so it's 12 years ago, and have developed that now into quite a large group where we've got 40 practitioners. At the heart for me has been preserving this tradition of psychotherapy, but wrapped in a blanket of beneficial technology. And by that I mean sort of paperless, electronic payments, wherever possible, to try and facilitate the booking process, the record management, to make practitioners' lives easier, as well as to kind of make the client's journey into therapy as seamless as possible. And then at the end of September last year, myself and my colleagues launched an online platform, which I'm going to dumb it down a little bit so that you get the concept, is a bit like Airbnb for therapists and psychologists, with the addition of being highly curated, selective, and ultimately quality-based. So the idea is that therapy should be made very, very easy to come by anyone, affordable and accessible. And that was driven out of about 10 years of work in and around Harley Street, where it is very exclusive and restrictive to a lot of clients. So this was kind of the idea of adding, allowing or harnessing technology to allow us to access more people. And so far it's going very strong, and we're harnessing new technology in so many different ways, and I'm going to cover that because my goal for you today is to try and learn about some of the techniques that are available for you to adopt, to consider at least whether it's of any use to you. And as you can see, I'm a therapy evangelist. I love everything therapy. So we're going to take a look at some of the kinds of digital innovation that are with us at our doorstep and coming at us quite quickly, how it impacts clinical practice, and getting ready for the future. Now, maybe I'll just ask, maybe I'll ask you, do you know of any, or can you think of any industries of recently that have been completely almost turned around by technology, and whose future can be limited, if not changed substantially?
Travel agents.
Travel agents, exactly. So no longer do you go into the booth, you sit down in a shop with someone, you can do it yourself. The technology is there. Publishing, also very much in the online world.
The music industry.
Music industry. Yeah. And the photography industry, banking, you know, that's kind of in progress. And through the course of history, we've seen certain sectors just being taken over, and before you know it, they're gone. So you don't have people delivering telegrams to you anymore. You know, you don't have people in call centers connecting your phone call with wires. So this is a kind of thing that we really should start thinking about in terms of how is our sector going to be affected? Is it going to be one of these to be changed substantially? Some other examples: the car industry we're in the process of a revolution now. Autonomous driving, they say, is on the way. It might be blockaded by regulation, but there's also this idea that very little can get past the wave of innovation that's to come. You can try for so long, and it might take a few years, like lobbying, protectionism, but eventually that change is going to give way to the new age. So yeah, in 20 to 30 years, it's estimated that we will see more changes than we have in the past 1,000. Not that we've seen it personally in the past 1,000, but there has been on record. And this is because of a process of, it's really accelerating technology and this sort of concept of diffusion, which is whereby we are more interconnected than ever, and the spread of new technologies can really catch fire very, very quickly. No longer do you have early adopters followed by very late adopters with a huge stretch. It just happens very, very quickly. Something as introduced like Snapchat, it catches off. Pokemon Go, again, wildfire. And this is kind of the world that we have to contend with. Exponentiality. I want to introduce you to the concept of singularity. Has anyone come across that? Singularity? The idea that kind of technology is going to kind of increase at such velocity that basically any human problem can be solved by computing power, which is quite scary in a way because, you know, human problems, the emotional world and our mental health is a problem in a sense, but how is that going to be solved by computing power, and do we even want it to be if we're able to? Whether we think about brain transplants or how that is. It gets into the realm of the very surreal, but that is kind of being discussed. Views of the future, you've got kind of pros, cons, somewhere in the middle. I'm actually going to Silicon Valley tomorrow on a 5-day trip. I align myself very closely with a lot of the thinking. However, I try and pull myself back. If anything, Christoph was saying, he's slightly at the other end. But increasingly, a more balanced view has come out, which is that technology can do great things. It can increase efficiency, productivity, take out the mundane aspect of autonomous, of kind of sort of mechanistic roles, very repetitive tasks. It can therefore sort of boost jobs in a different kind of set of sectors, whether it's maintenance and engineering, and improve everyone's welfare, because we can maybe put resources into solving issues like, or working on rather, issues such as well-being. But on the other hand, lots of talk about what this is going to do in terms of income inequality and employment. Basically, if autonomous driving is introduced, what's going to happen to truck drivers, delivery folk, etc.? That's a lot of jobs to have to replace. And so the balanced view, which even some of the technology leaders now are coming out with in the past few days, even it was Sergey Brin, who's a co-founder of Google, is saying, let's be mindful, definitely opportunistic, because that's his realm, but at the same time be very mindful of the potential negative impact of the technology going in the wrong direction. I've mentioned this already. History shows that once technology takes hold, there's very, very little stopping it. At the same time, as humans, we are highly resistant to change, right? We like our patterns. We like following trains of sort of habits and behaviors, and it is very difficult for us to want to do anything different than what we already do, which works for us. So what exactly is going to happen to the world, of the field of psychology and mental health, given this smart world where everything's being digitized? Well, let me start off with the good news, and hopefully this will kind of settle you down, which is it's estimated in the near to short term, like 20 to 30 years, that there will be an increased need for, you see the yellow arrow, psychology, counseling, and therapy. And the reason is that robotics are not advanced enough to replicate key skills such as empathy and warmth and the human dimension, which we all need as individuals. But there are other professions that are going to be pretty much sidelined. Financial advisors, you don't really need an advisor anymore. You can go online and you can type in, fill in a questionnaire. It profiles you. It could analyze your banking history and make a determination as to where you should be investing, as opposed to someone who's a human, who's prone to error, who's prone to bias, and who's only available 9 to 5. So this is so this is my kind of construction of what I see happening to our sphere, to our field, and I've kind of categorized it in 4 different areas. The first being diagnostics, which is checking in on our sort of mental health or emotional well-being. We see a lot of robotics already coming into place in terms of our physical health, and it's quite possible, and it's already happening, that investment is being made into tracking our emotional status as well. Who here wears a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or some sort of monitoring device? Few. So that's a wearable. We're going to have digestibles, which are like tiny grains of sand, microchips that you can swallow, and then it can do the internal investigation of scoping out, again, physical conditions. Implantables. Is anyone diabetic or know anyone who's diabetic? You can now have a blood sugar monitor chip inside you, and you can connect to that, and it reads it. It's very clever. It's slightly scary to see this kind of man-machine type thing of how we're molding into it. But that is just going to keep increasing, and it's going to also develop into measuring different emotional scales on different vectors. And so here's one company. It's called Beyond Verbal, and they're measuring different things which I haven't even got to grips of, things like valence, combined emotions, temper, and they're able to do that through voice, also through things like monitoring heart rate, blood pressure, certain hormones. In the end, we'll probably be able to kind of assess for adrenaline levels, serotonin, anything that's measurable will probably become measured. And that's going to give us more access to what's going on internally, but more important, sort of healthcare providers as well. So you might be able to be alert, your healthcare provider or your therapist might be alerted to what your shift in emotional state is at any one time. So that's less fancy because it's kind of, it's just tracking what potentially you could verbalize. I mean, that's what happens in sessions, is a client's letting you know how they feel, that they feel anxious, that they feel down. But these are kind of sensors and devices that are going to be able to kind of assist with that work. Same with care bots. The Japanese are really big on care bots and the kind of investment in them. Has anyone seen an image of a care bot? So it's like a kind of a nurse. Again, it's geared towards the physical, being able to monitor and measure physical symptoms and then alert them to either take medication or go call a health practitioner. And it looks like this. So that is, again, not equipped with empathy skills yet, so there's no threat to us at the moment. Okay, so searching. Searching is changing. The way we search for practitioners and your services is very much in the process of changing, and I'm part of that movement now. My platform, harleytherapy.com, is based on algorithms to rank therapists. I know it's not something that everyone is embracing. In fact, the 40 practitioners that I work with in-house are very reluctant to be measured and monitored, and they are not at the moment. I'm keeping them very separate. They find it actually quite distasteful to be sort of charted and have their statistics graphed, but it is what we're doing with therapists, and it is with great results because...
Is that just searching online, or is that their also, their performance?
It's both.
Okay.
So the initial search online is pretty much, these are my symptoms, and we try and make the best match as possible based on previous records and what led to good outcomes, as well as kind of just general fields. Like if you know you're looking for something very specific, like trichotillomania, we only want you to see a counselor who's got experience in trichotillomania. And then the machine learning kind of builds on, the machine learning is something that we're developing. It's not operational yet. Does anyone know what machine learning is? A little bit. It's sort of kind of like iterative algorithms, so that it's constantly improving upon itself based on the data that you feed it. And there's going to be a lot of it. In a way, every time you search on Amazon for you bought this, you might like this, it's feeding in previous purchases, and it's kind of building and it's compounding upon itself as well. And this technology is kind of readily available to people building technology platforms as well. So it's nothing too extraordinary anymore, but it is being used.
Can you take your browser history, for example, if you've been looking at porn or been suicidal or something, would it be able to calculate that and then use that kind of information as well?
Technically, yes. Personally, our platform is not.
Okay.
I mean, we try, our ultimate aim is to try and make sure that the client gets placed in with the best therapist as possible, and that the best therapists are presented to the clients. How do we measure best? We measure by basically, are the clients returning on average? If they're only coming for one session, let's say 20 clients have only come one time, then something in their clients not getting something they need thereafter. We measure reviews, so the clients will be able to, they rate them. We also measure the speed of response. So a client will book an appointment. If it takes the therapist 3-4 days to confirm an appointment, that's not a great ranking factor because it's not a great experience for the client. So myself and my team have not gone crazy like Amazon, where everything is kind of fine-tuned and owned and like down to the minute, because we're dealing with the realm of the human, right? And we do want to make that, we want to kind of cut out the risk factor to clients of being allocated with someone who is not delivering in general what we think is going to be productive for or helpful to them. That's search, but this is the meatiest part, I would say, is the treatment. And before we get going on sort of my insight into, or my discoveries about how treatment is changing, I'd love to hear from you and your observations of how therapy is being delivered, and whether you're noticing any change and what your thoughts are to that change as well. So is anyone going to be brave and let me know if you've tried computerized therapy or engaged in email-based therapy or Skype counseling?
Yeah, professionally, our company has a treatment platform where some of these things come together, and we're trying to implement that now. And we are running into some problems you indicate now, both from the clinician side, and from the patient side.
Yeah. But you're going to keep pushing through it, and again, this is kind of a classic example of the melding with the human and technology. Is that how to fuse the two in a way that's productive ultimately to the human, rather than working for the machine and the betterment of that. But there's a lot. I mean, I'm certainly facing a lot of resistance from people who do not want to adapt to new technologies. And personally, my own bias is that I'm not very pro text message therapy, 10-minute sessions, anything that kind of reduces the therapeutic encounter to nuggets, or that in some way commoditizes it, like purchasing packages of sessions, like you can have 4 a month whenever you want it, however you want it. I just feel personally is not as beneficial to a client as much as that depth of relating once a week for a 15-minute session, going into their inner world, having the week to process it, and coming back and kind of taking it forward. So I don't know, maybe I'm the dinosaur after all, even though I love technology. So maybe I will catch up to on-demand services, as in, I want it when I want it. But as we'll discover soon, there's something about the kind of immediacy which can create difficulties, because if we give the clients everything they want when they want it, that's perhaps a sort of a clinical issue that's being sidestepped as opposed to being worked through and understood a bit more. Has anyone come across virtual reality in therapy at all? Or has anyone rather tried the virtual, like an Oculus Rift headsets? You've tried those? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's great, and I heard that they're now doing, in the Netherlands at least, a pilot with trauma therapy through virtual reality. And my personal experience is just with entertainment, not so much as treatment for.
We are the ones who are doing this.
Excellent. Tell me more.
Well, the first experiences are great, but we use it now as an add-on. So it's EMDR with a virtual reality module, but we use it as an add-on, so it's sort of blended therapy. It's not standalone by now. But patients really like it, and they are able to have more sessions, because we have limited set of therapists who can give EMDR, and after some sessions they can practice by themselves. Yeah, super.
Excellent. That's really exciting to hear. I mean, the thing that technology offers us is scalability, because humans can only be, they've only got so much time on their hands and so much resources, and also not as consistent, right? So the studies have shown that, like, judges' moods, they'll be more lenient after lunch than before because they've been fed. Whereas with a set of Oculus Rift glasses, if you're doing immersion therapy, the quality is going to be the same whether it's before or after. It's kind of like that kind of more consistency if it's of use. So again, the VR, the thing that kind of makes it very helpful is that empathy. So you are able to step into someone else's world or a different viewpoint, and therefore kind of maybe adjust your thinking. Is that roughly your understanding as well?
Yeah, so patients don't mind so much about the empathy in that stage of therapy, because they say, well, it gives them more opportunities, and even in the case of, for example, guilt or shame or anger, they even prefer to do that with the Oculus, because they feel more free to express themselves and to fill in the questions they have to fill in. And So it makes it
Interesting.
more easy because they are so shameful about their experiences, for example.
Interesting. Yeah.
These are, for
Yeah.
example, military soldiers
Yeah.
who have done things that they feel very guilty about or shameful
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But most resistance was with the therapist.
Of course.
With the clients.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They
Yeah.
feel it as a sort of threat.
Yeah.
And the first reaction is that can be effective.
Yeah.
So the empathy factor is maybe sometimes also overrated, I think.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll see studies on efficacy as well, like in rolling out. The difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. So virtual reality is like an immersive experience. You put yourself into it, whereas augmented means it's almost as if it's kind of an enhancement to our daily worlds. Do you remember the experiment, the Google Glass, where people will wear that? It's almost like, it's called a PHUD. It's a personal heads-up device, which is kind of like projects contextual information when you're either walking or some cars used to have it. It used to be very big in the States. You could see how many miles per hour you were going on a holograph, which they don't do here anymore, but it's almost like the sort of computerized dashboard, except it's not an actual physical dashboard, it's projected. So I haven't really come across very many instances, or any at all, in fact, of AR being applied to therapy, but I'm sure there might be examples in which it could be applied going forward. And then, of course, artificial intelligence. How far do you want to stretch your minds today? Will we get to a stage where robots will be able to deliver therapy, and what's it going to be like? Will they be able to mimic? And I've got some scary looking pictures here of like robots, which are, I mean, there's no real reason, apparently, why robots need to look like humans, apart from to sort of like settle us down. So long as they sort of do the function, they could pretty much be molded to anything. And in fact, sort of prosthetically, like the functioning of an arm, I think it's possible, like to construct body parts that are more efficient than the way the human body is designed. So there are definitely sort of ways of improving things mechanically.
Brain, we need to see someone that looks like a human so that we can at least
Exactly.
attribute sort of, the human social aspects rather than...
Exactly. For as long as we have a social brain, though, because to take things really far, what happens when we sort of supplant the social component with either chips or blockers? We block parts of those off. I mean, it's worth just technically stretching our mind, only then to sort of come back to earth. But absolutely, in terms of the sort of the robots that are probably more appealing to us, currently we absolutely need the social company. We need that. We need it for our mental well-being. So it's probably going to be a lot more reassuring. Let me go back to the sort of data processing. So the treatment is going to be changing. Actually, let me skip back just a minute to the on-demand services. So there are a lot of technology companies, some of which are in Silicon Valley, therapy-oriented, where you could, again, dial in and reach a therapist then and there. So that's kind of the more immediate services that are already in existence, and then we could start to think about what the implications are of that. Are they helpful or not? Now, with regards to the data processing, it's kind of a lump there, but there's different things that come out of it. Essentially, we are being sort of, data is the new oil, as they say, right? Anything that can be measured will be measured, and anything that can be turned into useful information is going to be. And you've been very much aware, I'm sure, of the whole Facebook scandal with Cambridge Analytica and where the information is going to. Data is a really precious commodity, and companies are collecting more and more and more of it in order, hopefully, to serve clients, to serve humans' needs, and to improve experiences, but often it can end up in the wrong hands as well. So this is where privacy comes into account, and there is all regulation currently, but it's probably going to see more requirements come our way. Who's aware of the GDPR, and who's prepared for the GDPR? Yeah. So again, another way of kind of secure or attempting to secure client, employees, and treatment providers' information. Outcome measures, it's nothing new, outcome measures. Who here uses some sort of monitoring forms of before and after surveys? Some? So again, that's going to be probably more digitized. Do you do them online already? Already online? So what happens with that information? And I mean, in aggregate, it's probably going to be useful to help service provision, but we just have to be mindful that there's going to be more of it and sort of the need to take care of it. Feedback and reviews, very contentious. I mean, I've towed that line very delicately for many years. I've resisted having our therapists reviewed because it just didn't seem to necessarily reflect what was going on in the session. I mean, you could have someone who'd be in therapy for a long time and report great improvement, but it not feeling fair to ask them to review a therapist for the purpose of their own self-promotion. So we didn't do that for a long period of time. But then we found clients started reviewing them anyway online. They would find sites like Trustpilot or Google Reviews, and they would do it. So the idea was that we would at least kind of integrate it into this new platform. So our current in-house therapists are not rated and monitored unless someone leaves it spontaneously. But for .com, it comes in with every at the end of each first session, the sixth session, and the end of treatment. So they will give them a star rating out of 5 and a comment if necessary. And the object being that clients who are searching find that helpful. And, essentially kind of creates this feedback loop where when therapists do good pieces of work and they get that star rating, they get more referrals and their practice sort of builds in that fashion. Contentious all the same. And then finally, e-payments. Who still works with cash payments here? Anybody? No. So when I first started 12 years ago, cash was the predominant model. We were charging like £80 a session, I think, private practice, and the majority of it was cash. And now the majority of it is PayPal, actually. PayPal, followed by Bax transfer, followed by Bax transfers to the therapist directly. So that's the kind of the order of it. But the therapists have really struggled with it because when you take, again, I'll sort of illustrate the sort of how technology now kind of mitigates the need for payment transactions at all. When you book an appointment on the .com site, you enter your card details once, and you do not need to make a payment again. So it's taken just before the session, which means that we don't have any debt. It also means that there's no money issues, because if there's no payment, then the session, they actually get a reminder, and then they will try and reinsert card details. But what about all of this kind of issue where, resistance, non-payment as a form of resistance, right? Or acting out. A lot of our therapists who work extremely psychodynamically miss that, and they're not sort of, they feel that there's not sufficient material to work with, or rather shifting material. But in actual fact, I think there's always material, right? There's always going to be something that the client is going to bring up, and I don't think that this is necessarily a particularly big issue. Okay, so I've spoken a little bit about how we use it. Our therapists work remotely via Zoom, or who uses Zoom? And who uses Skype? Skype? Okay, so there's an increasing debate about Skype not being fully confidential, and also you can see other people's addresses, sort of shared connections. So a lot of people are moving on to Zoom, and it's HIPAA compliant. We're going to be integrating it with it as well. So that's an interesting one to check out. We pseudo-anonymize our data, which means that we can have a profile of a therapist, we can have a profile of a client, but we can never tell, there's not enough detail in order to say who that client is. And again, we do that for service improvement. We want to see what the therapists are offering, what the clients are searching, so we can bring on more therapists or more clients to tailor to that need. And this is really interesting because this is something that I've been doing by handcrafting over the past 10 to 12 years. We found that suddenly ADHD was really popular. So we go out and we recruit for ADHD therapists. But it would take quite a long time before I or my colleagues were like, oh yeah, that's a theme. Whereas now we've got so many different graphs and bar charts, etc., monitoring and measuring things that we know right away that we need therapists who are specializing in ADHD or who can offer appointments within 2 days instead of 10 days. So the data is brilliant in the sense that it alerts us to trends and things that we need to deliver.
Is that through your Google Analytics that you can find out what people searched for before they got to your site? Or is it actually on your site?
It's on the site. It's on the site, and then it's once they engage in therapy, how long they stay for,
Okay.
the clients, and then the therapists also in terms of they are specialized in these issues, and clients either gravitate towards them and stay on their page a little longer or less longer. What are they looking for,
Okay.
essentially? It does feel, if I'm honest, it does feel a little Big Brothery. It does. I mean, there's no getting away with that. It's uncomfortable, and we try our best. Again, pseudo-anonymization, the GDPR, we're compliant with that, but we're able to profile more about anyone who uses it. But hopefully, again, we're driven to make everyone's experience better, clients and therapists. So let's now think together about some of these implications. And I don't have any hard and fast answers for you because I don't really know how they're going to sit with you in particular. All I can do is sort of raise different sets of questions so that we can start to think about them together. Firstly, before I go through mine, what concerns do you have when you are kind of thinking about this topic? Anything that alarms you or sits uneasy with you?
Confidentiality is the biggest issue.
Confidentiality.
And the relationship between the therapist and the patient.
If I was a patient, it would be about trust based on a sort of similar thing. How do you know the person that you're talking to is the person that you're talking to? And, you know, particularly with the clients that we deal with, they would be worried about, you know, some information coming out about them and things like that. They probably wouldn't want to do something like that.
Is that a new issue though? Like, it's the kind of like the confidentiality. I mean, there's something to be said about like there's more of a chance of being overheard in a room in a building than there is in two people's homes where they're connecting on a digital medium. I mean, you can still be eavesdropped, etc. But do you mean that kind of that channel of connection where the voice recording is going, who's listening in? Is that the kind of, yeah. Yes.
I think the connection is much more vulnerable. I mean, how many 19-year-old Russian hackers are trying to get into your room in your house versus hacking into computer lines? And when you think about what you said about how data is so valuable, I don't think most companies are collecting and analyzing data to make people's experiences better. I think their primary motive is profit, and their secondary motive is to make things better so that they can make more profit. And so I think that creates a huge vulnerability to the privacy issue because this kind of data is so much more quote-unquote valuable about people.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at how things are happening, for instance, in employment law and the degree to which candidates are scrutinized and things are dug into, so suddenly a therapy session you had virtually 2 years ago is costing you your big dream job opportunity. I think there's just a lot of vulnerability from a data privacy perspective.
And there's no doubt there's trails of things. I mean,
Once it's online, it's
there's a
there
footprint.
forever, and
Yeah.
somebody knows how to find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't complying with GDPR ensure some of that security, data security?
I mean, it should technically. I mean, sort of encryption, secure servers. making sure that again, sort of having regulation on password or guidance on password protection. So it should, but nothing is foolproof. I mean, even, some of the larger companies recently, and ones who have real vested interest in having privacy maintained, have been hacked. So the Ashley Madison scandal, which is like a site that, people do not want to have their details shared, that was also exposed. So there's definitely like that vulnerability there's no question it's there. So what can we do about that? We can try our best, and then backup plans of.
I guess it's a risk benefit.
It's yeah.
The risk of your applications and clients being hacked
Yeah.
by a Russian.
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
the new digital medium being very effective.
And it's really hard to opt out now. Like if you want to use WhatsApp, you have to give them permission to do certain things with if you want to share a photo, you have to allow them to access all of your photos, or else you don't use the service. And so it's a real sort of stark choice. Whereas actually we'd like something probably in the middle. We'd like assurances that they're not going to do certain things with our data, but we do leave ourselves quite exposed and vulnerable. Some of the other concerns or questions, I should say, I have is the immediacy. What is the effect when someone is able to access services on demand? They want to see a therapist and they're able to see them straight away and on their time frame, in the middle of the night, twice a month. Is that as likely to be as helpful as having this sort of regularity and consistency? I don't know, does anyone know of any, opening questions to you, does anyone know of any studies that have looked at short-term impact? Because I'm not aware of any at the moment. I know the services are out there. The technology companies are putting a lot of resources into packaging therapy, but not aware of long-term studies on it. And then let's say even that it is effective. Let's say we get information that shows that someone's well-being or mental health or whatever, on whatever scale, whether you measure it on something like the BDI, BAI, improves the same, whether it's short-form text message therapy versus the once-a-week traditional format, even if they are the same. Is there something that's not being measured that's lost? Sort of that depth of care, that humanity, which is also kind of not being captured, and therefore there's a loss in another area. And then sort of, the measurability. What does it do to clinicians to be measured? Right? Does it affect their work? And it's something that we're going through currently, the objection to being measured, because therapists don't feel that they are a really product, which is absolutely correct. But again, in a world where everything is being formalized or made more kind of efficient, if you do not go on it, will you get the work that good clinicians deserve to get? It's a tricky one. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Feedback is generally put out when somebody's bad. So also the client might not be told what they want to hear. Aren't they more inclined to give more of a bad unless I can record it better.
You can sing us a tune too. I mean, we'll take songs.
More of a bad review if they don't get the response that they want from the therapist. If the therapist not telling them what they want to hear, they turn around and give a one-star rating. It also starts the client shopping around for therapists rather than actually dealing with that therapist and going to the issue that they should.
Any thoughts of how we can work on that? Because I absolutely agree. It's the sort of the shopping around, the slating through. They don't have a good therapeutic encounter for reasons perhaps more that really should be worked on, but instead they trash a therapist online with a negative rating. Any thoughts of how to work with that?
I like the star rating that you had. It forces them to give a rating. I don't know if it's always efficient. I don't know if it really gets to it. You can't really rate therapy in a one-to-one.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best option. I sat here thinking once you mentioned it earlier, how could you rate it? Like you said,
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist, so
Yeah.
thank God they're never going to rate me. But I work in an addiction treatment, and I know if somebody's going to review us, they're going to review us badly. Because if they had a good time, they're not going to go and put it on Google reviews, and they're not going to, they've got what they've needed and they've left and they've gone off. But if they relapse, or if we had to discharge them for whatever reason that's there, the chances are they're going to go into Google and go write an absolutely terrible review, give us 1 star and blame everything on us rather than what is coming out of them.
Yeah. So you don't solicit reviews at the end? No.
It's people have offered, and even then, just for their own anonymity. Google, you've got to put your name, you've got to put your surname.
That's right.
It's rather not. Word of mouth is a lot better than Google reviews.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
I wonder if it doesn't end up like Uber, where the clients are being reviewed as well. Because I'm thinking, like, if you think about the type of client that's going to be the most likely to have one bad encounter and write a bad review, or you think about clients who have, for instance, personality disorders, who really should be only targeted to certain kinds of therapists. Therapists are going to want some control over the clients that come to them, too. Because the last thing you want is a whole slew of borderlines showing up. I need an immediate appointment, and then you get 15 terrible reviews because you didn't fix everything, which doesn't help them either. And so do you end up with a situation where then, just like Uber, the passenger is being reviewed, and then therapists are turning down clients because you're a 1-star passenger.
That's right.
Forget it.
Yeah. It's really very valid point. And my colleague who's here, Orly, we looked at that. I believe we looked at whether there should be a two-way rating, and we agreed that not for the first time. Not for the time. Oh, I'm no doubt. I mean, it seems to like sort of be a, two-sided marketplace. Therefore, two sides get a voice.
But the aim is to put two people together to get the best, quality solution, hopefully. And then hopefully to give the therapist some feedback. But they can do that themselves by reflecting and, possibly doing that.
They could. I mean, one other thing that's really interesting is that the BPS guidelines advise against soliciting reviews. Yeah. Right?
And from a neuroscience point of view, you shouldn't solicit negative reviews for yourself, because then you start listening to your negative thoughts. But from if you can do kind of positive feedback, that's much better for you, and you're more likely to be more motivated to do well. Whereas if you go in, and I've introduced performance management across the civil service, and it didn't go down very well at all, because that was, again, measuring against others and things. And from a psychological point of view, it's really obvious you shouldn't do that. So I think that there's other ways of doing it.
Again, really, really interesting. And do you want to be measured? If you do agree to be measured, do you want to see your position relative to others, even if it's just like a benchmark? It's something, again, we're grappling with internally. And so far, I think the pulse is that actually well, internally anyway, I don't know about sort of the digital world, is that sort of they want more trust placed in them, that they're doing a good enough job, that they don't need to be benchmarked, etc. So, but that is more the touchy-feely kind of operation that we run, as opposed to the digital. So it's really exciting. We're kind of straddling both sides, and we're seeing what works where. Is quicker matching beneficial to clients, or is there benefit, sort of an advantage in patients, like, again, the on-demand services? Should they wait for an appointment, or should they be perfectly fine with the same-day appointment?
So I thought that actually they make a decision based on how local they are, how quick they can get in. So you have to think about, your business and think, is it important to me? I don't really like microphones. Is it important to the company to get the right clients in, and then you need to match them with the right therapist, obviously, or because basically clients make decisions based on, right, I can get in and see them on a Tuesday morning really easily, rather than actually who's the best person for me. So there's kind of a bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't think they really shop. They kind of look around and whoever, they kind of read the profiles and then they go for someone who they think they relate to quite quickly.
Yeah. So again, if a service is not doing that, because like we're always so patient and client minded that we want to make them wait if it's good for them to wait, right? So, but at the same time, there's probably going to be other services that are going to give into that instant gratification, and would we rather be doing it because ultimately we feel that we've got a better quality of service or something really meaningful to add to them. We've covered reviewing therapists, and I think that, although, for example, the BPS advised against it, it's very different when it's a marketplace because you're not the individual therapist asking for the review, and therefore with the bias or the potential pressure that comes with. Virtual reality, will that be as effective as face-to-face? Let's assume that it might be. Again, is there some dimension that's lost, that's taking us away from being human? And I'm going to give you some book recommendations at the end of it, but it's quite scary if you read a lot of the sort of prophetic, futuristic books that are sort of technology-based. Essentially, there are no more dinosaurs on the planet, and we potentially are a species that is going to be evolved and phased out or blended with technology, merged with technology. It's so hard to reflect on ourselves now. All we think is things are never going to change. Things will always be this way. There will always be people who drive cars, and we'll always have jobs as a psychologist, etc. And humans, we will, stay in our current physical formats. But I think we do have to open our minds to the possibility that the future is going to give way to something other than us. What is it going to look like, and how are we going to handle the merging or stroke replacement by technology? Probably. There's a quote that's something like, the future is made out of robots, but the good news is, or something, that they are our children, right? So that it's going to be very different, but they will be products of us. We will help build them and shape them. And data collection, privacy risks, we've spoken a little bit about. Human experiences, which are difficult to contextualize. Is everything going to be reduced to sort of bits and bytes and informational data? And I've spoken also a little bit about the clinical loss of material, which I don't think is as significant as some of the other kind of ones. Any reflections on that? Any other questions to add to the mix of what we might have to kind of consider as we're being faced by emerging technologies? Anything that's been on your radars or your worlds?
I guess to be open to other bits. So, for example, if there's something that can measure your neurotransmitters or the way that your brain's processing something, so that you could be sitting with a monitor looking at your client and then seeing whether their brain patterns are in a certain way that means that they're being more effective or taking in it, learning or something like that. So getting new insights for things. So maybe that kind of thing coming up.
And do you mean as a practitioner, or as a okay?
So you'd add to everything you've got already. Plus, you might need to also, know how to use some equipment that measures brain waves or something like that.
That is really interesting. So we're kind of looking again at the diagnostics, but not only patient, but also practitioner.
But also, it's also the outcomes, because you can look at the way the brain produces waves to see aha moments in the brain and things. And look, and also that would be a judge of you. Are you getting them to go to the aha moments quicker and things like that? So there's all sorts of things that can happen.
So like measuring or measuring and tracking interventions and their efficacy, or what the effective change is.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was wondering, in Holland we have a website, a sort of independent website where everyone can be rated, an organization but also a therapist. And what you see is like at booking.com that the most enthusiastic people react, of course, and the most negative ones. Yeah. And sometimes even people react who haven't been there at all. And there is no check on it. So it's quite difficult if you want to contact such an organization and say, well, no one ever heard of this patient or recognizes anything this says from our therapist, and you're completely, you're not able to do anything at all. You're very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they say things about people, and we don't recognize it at all. So if it's good, transparent feedback, it's of course okay. But you don't know who is writing and who is. So sometimes there's also missions, or someone can try to hurt a person or an organization, and you have no defense towards that.
Yeah.
So if everyone would rate you, it would be objective, I think. But you have a selection of people, and it can really hurt certain therapists. And people who don't do exactly what the client wants them to do, or they have another idea about the treatment or whatever. So that's I think that's a very critical thing.
Yeah. I think it ties in with what you're saying about the sort of negative reviews, where they come from. Are they authentic, basically? Are they genuine?
Yeah,
and I'm sure everyone's probably had or heard of some experience where there's been negative feedback that hasn't been valid. We certainly have in our practice, and there are times when we've been able to get that removed, and other times when not. And that all we've been able to do is our best response of, we don't think you're a patient, etc. But it definitely kind of leaves you, open. And what that does is it also, I think it's affected a number of our practitioners as well, who felt essentially at the mercy of these kind of reviews. I mean, it can make or break a career. I mean, their reputation that they've taken so long to build up, and a client's looking them up and they see no reviews because they're not soliciting them, but then they see a negative one which isn't genuine, or it might be genuine but not founded because of their clients presenting issues or circumstances. And they do feel very exposed and very vulnerable as a result of that.
We also make use, of course, with that same platform, and the other side is that we ask every patient who comes into our facility, how did you find us? And most of them say,
I'm hoping for karaoke, people. I mean, like, we got to get warmed up.
Okay. Now, most of them say, we read some good reviews on that website, and that's why we finally chose for your facility. And what we did is that we motivate every patient after their treatment to leave a review. So we mentioned that this site is there, and we try to make them enthusiastic to write something.
It works the other way around as well, of course. We get fake positive reviews.
Right, yes.
Where people create a whole mythology about their facility, about their services, and they've only been operating for 1 week or something, and they create an impression that they're the most reliable and effective and experienced facility. So it's the democracy of the internet, where anybody can do anything at any time, and who's to know the better. I think that's often the real danger, the fake positive reviews.
Yeah. And of course, the more discerning mind or eye can pick that up. You can usually sort of scan the reviews and say that doesn't sound quite right, or that sounds over the top. It works both ways with the positive and negative ones. But not everyone can, especially if you're in a state of distress and you're just looking at the star ratings with a key highlighted words, which difficult.
So, what are the areas of communication between your team or your clinic and the patients? Is it website? Is it the full range of social media? Which of them? Can you tell us about this point?
Sure, I think I understand. I think I follow your question, which is like how do the two interact? And with our platform, it's essentially like an intermediary. So we will do the connecting, and the appointment system you can rebook, and you can look at the client's assessment files, which are stored. But there's no kind of external communication like social media. There's no messaging service yet. It's a platform. Again, like, Airbnb, I don't want to minimize us or insult them or vice versa, but essentially therapists are listing their services and we're marketing them for them, but we're curating it based on a number of parameters that are ever evolving. We're ever sort of tweaking them and shaping them. And it's a new project, so it's not as if we have years of...
Where are you in Holly Street?
Harley Street, we're 2 buildings. We're at 1 to 7 and number 10, but that is, it's not the .com. So .com is the online marketplace.
1 to 7.
Yes.
So you are in the same camp.
High five. Yeah, yeah. Next to the office with the robot. Yeah. So really, what this all is about is that there are sways of technologies coming our way. There's already the ones that we have to contend with, and really to hold in mind, at the moment, human connection, and long may that live, is invaluable and really important, and acting in the best interests of our clients. So to kind of work and work in the way that suits us as practitioners and makes our careers fulfilling and meaningful as well. So my prediction, and this is just me, is that I think our services will just grow in demand. I think things like very shortened attention spans, new technologies, in fact, which kind of compete with everyone's attention and make them sort of frazzled and fractious. Not connecting with people, enough people in the kind of the real world sense, more virtual contact, I think will also lead to sort of sense of alienation and loneliness, and kids having to grow up. And I'm sure every generation says this, but I do feel like kids are having to grow up a lot quicker. They're exposed to a lot more, technically, you're laughing because I am old, let's say, but with so much access to the internet, you can see anyone. We're no longer the sort of the magic number of 150 people, which we can actually hold in mind comfortably. We can access what anyone's doing, celebrity, friend, family, if they make themselves available online. And that's kind of dizzying. It can be really disorienting to some people. I'm sure the younger generation will take that in their stride, but they're less able to spend time with fewer people and know them in depth. So that's where I think our services are going to be more in demand and ever growing. And then here's a little bit, which is that this is a prediction by Brett King, whose book I'm going to recommend to you. The prediction that symptom treatment is going to give way to kind of more preventative medicine as well, and that might sort of stretch to our sphere too. Subject to big pharma yielding in terms of politics and the privacy concerns. No chance? You think it's steeped, embedded? Yeah. Brett King, he wrote a book called Augmented. It's one of the sort of futuristic books, but fairly realistic. I mean, we are doing personalized risk assessment. If anyone has health insurance with something like Vitality, you get points if you wear a Fitband or something and your heart rate's good and you go for a physical check, etc. Soon these wearables, implantables, and digestibles will be monitoring us, and they'll let the healthcare companies know if we're safe to insure, etc. In summary, our profession is definitely not immune to digital disruption, but we can take the bits that we feel are constructive and hopefully weave them into our practice without selling out entirely. And basically the theme of kind of evolving, listening, evolving, and adjusting to the best of our ability. And here's the reading list. Anyone read Sapiens? Yeah. And have you read Homo Deus as well?
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, that was very scary, that daughters, and was terrifying.
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening and unsettling. Life 3.0 probably takes that a little bit further even, in terms of where we are going with technology, the merging and giving way to it. And then again, Brett King Augmented gives a lot of practical examples of how things, especially with things we haven't talked about today, like cryptocurrency and blockchain and the way our world is changing, which incidentally is going to give us as practitioners a whole different set of material to work with, because presenting issues are going to change likely as well as people are living in a more digitally enhanced world. So I'm going to leave you on that note. I wish you the best as you integrate technology into your daily worlds. If you want to see an example of how we use it, you can see chatbots. You can see sort of the algorithms on the client side. You don't get to see behind the stuff. But if you're interested in finding out the nuts and bolts, then ping me an email or reach us in any one of these ways. And yeah, I wish you a good the rest of the evening and the next 2 days as well.